I'm still in the oldest section of Mount Hope, and I'm going to endeavor to give you a panoramic view to give you some idea of how many stones are actually here. And of course you'll see the lovely trees. There are trees everywhere, and that's, as I said, one of the reasons why I like this cemetery so much. There again in the background is the Mainz Gray Mausoleum. I like the quaint roads too that separate the various sections. Directly ahead of us, just over the fence there, is Blessed Sacrament Church and School. And now directly ahead of us is West Main Street in Belleville. This is the beautiful Victorian monument for Dr. Strecker. As you see the urn on the top, draped as customary. And actually, it says that Dr. Strecker died in 1894, which means this is one of the first stones in this cemetery. But it is a lovely stone, again a beautiful example of the artist's work. This is rather interesting. It's an actual gutter made of bricks, and it runs the course of this entire section of the cemetery, and no doubt is original and dates to the very beginning of Mount Hope. Quite interesting. If these stones could only talk. As you see, there's another portal, J. Morris, quite popular in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now I'm walking in one of the, quote, newer sections of Mount Hope. By newer, I mean probably this section saw its first burial in the 1920s. But hey, for a cemetery, that's new. Several interesting stones, again, in this area. Here's a lovely cameo again for a lovely lady, Vern E. Moore. And again, in some of these stones, some of these monuments, you really see the Art Nouveau style at its height. The Schwab stone directly ahead of me. Just a beautiful example of Art Nouveau. And you can't tell me they didn't realize that there was a tree on either side, which is quite interesting. We're on top of a hill now, and again I'm going to give you a panoramic view just to give you some idea just how many stones there are here. It's an incredible amount. And the section actually goes down the hill to my left. So my pictures that I'm showing you are actually a little misleading because it looks like the line of stones there you see toward the back is it. But the hill goes down and there are hundreds beyond. This is a lovely view, looking down on a few of the newer sections of the cemetery. I'm still on the top of the hill. And again, you see trees. No matter where you look, there are trees, which I love. Some of these modern cemeteries, it's so sad, if I can make an editorial comment. You walk into them and they're so barren. No plant life whatsoever. And it really is a shame. This is beautifully laid out. It's a very interesting stone. Of course, the gentleman was a pharmacist. Has a sundial in front of it, and at the base you can see it says time, present, past. Here's one of my friends, Charlie Getty and Erna. Charlie Getty was a little bit of everything, a businessman, alderman, you name it. Very well liked, I should say very well loved in East St. Louis. Died in 1935. And you can actually see a picture of Charlie and read a biography at findagrave.com. I entered his data. His family, his mother and his father and siblings, at least most of them, are buried in the oldest part of the cemetery. So most of them are here together at Mount Hope. Again, this is a lovely stone, and if I can pan out a little bit, you'll see again that it's between two trees, which makes it quite interesting and a focal point for this part of the cemetery. Now I'm entering what I consider a very touching portion of Mount Hope Cemetery. These are all children. Some of the graves are quite old and are illegible, like the one I show you now. Some are legible, like the Beckner stone. Then you have one to the left that originally had a cameo with the little child's picture, and unfortunately the cameo has deteriorated or been knocked out or whatever. There's a very touching part of the cemetery. You see ahead of me some very, very small stones. Little Geneva Ross, 1927 to 1932. But one of the things I do appreciate about this part of the cemetery is that, as you can tell, most of these little children are remembered. There are flowers at practically every grave. Donald only lived from May to July, 1942. And here's a Robert Dorman. 1936 to 1937. Betty Lindsay, directly to his left, again 1936 to 1937. But as I give you a panoramic view of this section of the cemetery, again, notice how many flowers there are. So these wonderful children are remembered. Some have rather large bouquets. Most of the stones here are very small. And as you can tell, some of the cameos are still here. Robert Paul Forrester, 1928 to 1929, if I can zoom in. I'm still in the children's section, or one of the children's sections, because there are a couple. And I wanted to bring your attention to this because I have seen this in many cemeteries where a tree actually overgrows the stone. Now before we leave Mount Hope, I wanted to show you this incredible stone, and it's for the Spanagle Burton plot. It's a very unique design. Of course, it has a beautiful quote. If you can see it. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown." And he replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. Thou shalt be to you better than light and safer than a known way." Remember, when you're in a cemetery, you never leave a cemetery without uttering a prayer for the dead. And I like to say, "Fidelium anime per misericordiam Dei, requiescant in pace. Amen." Which of course is Latin, and it means, "May the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen." And I hope these individuals do rest in peace. They are my friends. I hope you've enjoyed this little walkthrough of Mount Hope Cemetery, Belleville, Illinois, Memorial Day weekend 2014. Thank you.